China has conducted massive war games around Taiwan. Is this preparation for their invasion? And just what exactly can they tell us about Beijing's strategy? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's get into it. Okay, so this I thought was interesting. China staged a multi-day wargame exercise for what they called punishment of the Taiwanese government after they held elections and a obviously pro-independence president took office, right? Lai Ching-te has taken office and was explicit that they feel that Taiwanese independence is a core aspect of the Taiwanese identity and is not subject to negotiation with Beijing. Beijing obviously feels quite differently, and they conducted a large-scale military exercise simulating the seizure of the island. And what I thought was interesting, right, first off, is some of the rhetoric. China maintains that Taiwan is a separatist province and Lai's claims that it is that the two countries or the two areas, I guess, are separate countries is directly at odds with that. And this is part of the larger sort of Chinese or CCP narrative that loyalty can only exist, that the CCP is the only thing to which people should be fundamentally loyal. That's why they don't have, that's why they persecute all sorts of religious beliefs. They also have this mentality that Han Chinese Mandarin speakers are the best Chinese, the right Chinese. And so the idea that there could be a Mandarin speaking Han Chinese independent nation that itself is self-governing, right, where the citizens have a say in their government, is a direct affront to the CCP's control of their population. So the CCP needs to continually threaten Taiwan, but there's some catches to kind of the overall situation. First, the CCP realizes that seizing Taiwan would put them directly at odds with the United States, a military that is much more capable by most accounts than the Chinese military. While China has gone on a huge modernization program, it's still a long way away from the United States Navy, who operates a blue water strategic navy and has for decades. It also, of course, would mean that they would lose the United States as their primary trading partner. The U.S. is who buys most of China's goods, and an invasion of Taiwan would almost immediately incur a restriction in trade of Chinese goods and services. That itself would be a problem. And we're seeing it becoming increasingly a problem already as more and more key industries try to find ways to position their supply chains outside of China, going to places like Vietnam, both because the Chinese economy has grown to the point where it's no longer the cheapest of the cheap places to manufacture, but also because of the state restrictions, again, that the CCP puts on free enterprise. All this to say, again, the idea of a free market, democratic country that is thriving economically, while China increasingly is facing economic distress, is just intolerable by the CCP. So, why did they launch this attack? And more importantly, what is the overall strategy here? And this I thought was actually really interesting. So as part of the exercises, let's pull it up on Google Maps here. Right, this will be pretty good. So as part of these exercises, the CCP, or rather let's see if I can get this closed out here. Okay, so as part of these exercises, the Chinese, the PLA, the People's Liberation Army Navy, or the plan, staged a kind of joint operation, and it revealed part of their plan to seize Taiwan. Because here's the tactical problem that the PLA runs into, is that in seizing Taiwan also, in addition to being symbolically problematic, as an independent country. It's also economically a very sought after prize, right? It has a large semiconductor industry. It is a massively valuable economy, despite being relatively small vis-a-vis China in terms of both population and in terms of total GDP output, right? But when you look up Taiwan GDP per capita, you see that the Taiwanese GDP per capita is almost $32,000 per person, right? When you look up China, I can spell. China's GDP per capita, you see it's only $12,000 per person. So what we're looking at is a economy that's almost 3 times as productive as the Chinese economy. So China looks at this and they say, here's what we can't do. We cannot just glass this island, right? We cannot just burn Taiwan to the ground. It's too economically valuable. And so in order to preserve not just its people, but the key economic drivers, the semiconductor factories, China needs to implement a different strategy. And so that strategy focused on a few things. First, it simulated missile attacks striking key Taiwanese cities. This is likely part of a goal to cripple the government with precision strikes and diminish Taipei's ability to coordinate a national defense. The other aspects were that China actually practiced seizing control of many of the key islands around Taiwan, particularly that linked Taiwan and the Philippines. This is because Taiwan relies on energy production. They need a lot of energy resources, fossil fuels and liquid natural gas to fuel its high-tech industry. And so without that, and without the ability to get other sort of raw materials, Taiwan would have a much harder time resisting Chinese aggression. So to do that, China has to occupy these surrounding islands, right, and effectively create 2 quarantine zones. One is keeping the Taiwanese military in, and the other is keeping the U.S. military out. And that is actually a very difficult tactical task to solve. But that was core part of this drill where you had both surface vessels taking positions, you had aircraft engaging in patrols and simulated strikes against the Taiwanese military or the hypothetical Taiwanese military bases. And then you also had, probably not publicly acknowledged, but almost certainly had Chinese submarines conducting operations off the shore and a variety of other quarantine blockade. It's a blockade. I don't know why I'm calling it a quarantine. It would be a blockade. Other ways that China is going to establish this blockade. The problem with a blockade strategy, right? It's very effective in preserving the objective, which is Taiwan. The problem is blockades take time, and by establishing these blockade positions, China is placing a bet. It's betting that it can hold that blockade until Taipei is willing to surrender, right? That would mean that it would have to start to, for lack of a better term, burn, right? Taipei would have to start burning resources. So obviously, its people are going to need food to eat. Its power plants are going to need coal and other things to continue to fire and have electricity in the country. It also, their military is going to rely on resupply, additional artillery shells, additional drones, additional bullets. And so China needs to both ensure that they can establish this blockade in Taipei and then begin to attrit, right, engage in a war of attrition against the Taiwanese military. And that's where the amphibious landing ships come in. China doesn't have to seize all the key parts of the island. It simply has to get the Taiwanese military working, fighting, expending munitions in order for the blockade to really take effect. Imagine if you've ever seen individuals that train in the training masks where they restrict the ability to breathe over the nose and mouth. that restriction coupled with vigorous exercise actually produces like a greater anaerobic effect. Is it smart or healthy? No, something tells me there's something bad about it, but that's the idea. You raise the expenditure rate and you reduce the input of resources and you create crisis conditions much faster. That's a core part of this Chinese strategy, is what we've learned from this exercise. The problem, too, is that the United States is going to be able to bring to bear more and more of its military capabilities into this fight to break the blockade. And so that's kind of the trade-off that China has to be willing to make. It's got to place a bet that not only can it seize these islands, but it can hold the blockade in place until the Taiwanese surrender and until the United States it must be unable to break the blockade until Taiwan gets desperate. Anyway, guys, if you're interested in is getting some exclusive combat footage, primarily from the Ukraine conflict, a little bit from Israel, Gaza. I host all those videos. They're totally uncensored, but they're on combatvetnews.com. They're for members only. This works like a Patreon. Specialist tier gets you access to all the videos. They drop twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's the viral combat footage from the preceding week. We break it down. We do an analysis. We learn basically how war is evolving in real time. It's pretty incredible. If you want to support the channel further, Lieutenant tier and Colonel tier are your two other options. Definitely want to check it out. So thanks to all the existing members. Thanks to all the new members, and thanks to everybody that hit like on the video and subscribed to the channel. And I will see you guys in the next one. Cheers.